Hello. Hi. How are you? Vicky Meg here. So, today I want us to talk about boundaries. Yeah, we don't like that word very much, but trust me, it's very important to have boundaries in life, in relationships, as a parent, as an employer, as an employee, literally as anything. Okay, so there's an article I've been working on this afternoon called Take Off Your Shoes, You're in My House. Yeah, I know. Today I don't have makeup. I didn't go out today. It's just me at home being mommy. I couldn't even get up to go to church. I was so tired. Come on, mommies. Do you feel me? Sometimes you just wake up and you just don't want to go anywhere. You just don't want to do anything. And that's just that. Like, whoever has a problem with that should have to deal with you later after you've rested. That's been me today. So, yeah. It wouldn't make sense for me to have makeup at home, right? That would just be ridiculous. Anyway, moving on. So today I want to talk about boundaries, and I have titled this article, Take Off Your Shoes, You're in My House. I am one of those people who likes my house clean. I like my house super clean. Like, I love a clean house, and when people come to my house, I am not afraid to tell people to take their shoes off. Yeah, I'm one of those. Sorry. Anyway, the reason why I do this is not only because my eldest daughter is allergic to dust, and my little one is asthmatic. I just don't want to have to deal with the consequences that comes with a dirty house. So I like to keep my house clean. I think I mentioned this last week's live video last Sunday, and I just like stuff in the right places, and I like for people to respect that, because I have high respect for people's boundaries, and so I expect people who with whom I interact to have the same what's the word I'm looking for? Common sense. However, we know that common sense is not common to everybody. So sometimes people can just walk into your house and you see, for me, boundaries, I was not always the kind of person who set boundaries at all. I would just like, let people treat me any kind of way, talk to me any kind of way. But then one day I just said, enough is enough. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start small. I'm going to start by telling people to take their shoes off when they come into my house. And I'm not afraid to say that. I'm not afraid to tell people, anybody whatsoever. I guess because I live far away from, countries and countries away from my birth home. And probably I would say the only person that would actually be invited to my house without the need to have to take the shoes is my dad. Besides that, take off your shoes. You're in my house. This is where I begin, and this is where you end. And that means you have to follow the rules within these boundaries. Okay? Look, boundaries define us. Okay? They define what is me and what is not me. A boundary shows where I end and where someone else begins. And it leads to a sense of ownership, knowing what I'm to own and take responsibility for gives me a sense of freedom. And if I know where my yard begins, for example, and ends, right? I'm free to do with it whatever I please, right? And taking responsibility for my life opens up many different options. And However, I do not own my life, like per se. Nobody really ever owns their life, but it means, I think what I'm trying to say is taking responsibility for your space, taking responsibility for what you're responsible for, and letting others know, the people around you and the people with whom you interact, know that, hey, this is where I begin, this is where you end. You cannot talk to me any kind of way. You cannot deal with me any kind of way. This is usually very, very, very true, especially during the holiday season when people, will have all these gatherings, which is cool. I love gatherings. I love, community. You can go to phenomenalmagazine.wordpress.com. There's a previous article called Community Matters. Really? Guys? And so, sorry, that's my little girl trying to get on my nerves. Anyway, yeah. So whenever we have gatherings and whenever we meet with other people, there's a lot of compromise, and sometimes it can be put down for not being a flexible person or not being able to be the kind of person who who is able to roll with the flow or do what everybody else is doing. However, as I said, I do not own my life, and my choices are options, and options become very limited. Think how confusing it'd be, right, if someone were to tell you, guard this property diligently because I will hold you responsible for what happens here. And then they didn't tell you, right? They didn't tell you, hey, Farmish Life, Lula, hi. What happened if they didn't tell you what, like where the boundaries of what you were supposed to guard were, right? It had become very confusing, or they did not give you the means with which to protect the boundary. This would not only be confusing, but also potentially dangerous, don't you think? Right? So I am a sucker for boundaries, and this is exactly what happens to us emotionally and spiritually when we don't know where we begin or where we end. And but then come to think of it, spiritually speaking, God designed life to have boundaries. That's why we have commandments, the do's and the don'ts of life. You can't just go around, stealing and hurting people and, doing even spirituality aside, even the law itself, like, governments, we have all these laws of do's and don'ts. There's certain things that if you do, you would end up in jail, or you'd be breaking a few laws and you would be on the wrong side of the law. So God designed a world where we all live within ourselves. What I mean is, we inhabit our own souls, and we are responsible for the things that make us us. Does that make sense? Each heart, Proverbs 14:10 says, each heart knows its own bitterness, and no one else can share its joy. We have to deal with what is in our soul, and boundaries help us to define what that is. If we're not shown the parameters or taught the wrong ones, for that matter, we're totally screwed. Because if you don't know what you're supposed to do or how to do it, how would you know how to actually do it, right? Sorry for the French. So, in addition to showing us what we are responsible for, boundaries help us define what is not on our property and what we are not responsible for. We are not, for example, responsible for other people. This is what I mean. We're not responsible for other people's choices. We're not responsible for how people look at us. We are not responsible. Hey, Stacy. Hi. We're not responsible for how people think towards us. We're not responsible for other people's opinions per se. We're not responsible for the things that people say about us oftentimes. And this is what I was telling. I had a date. I usually have dates with my kids, every now and then. And I had a date with my kids last week, and I was telling my kids, it's funny how the adult world, works. Adults will, especially parents, will judge each other with regard to how they parent. So you will judge me as a person according to how my child behaves, according to how my child speaks, according to how my child, greets other people, behaves around other people, and things like that. So, but you see, those are not things that I am 100% in control of. I can do my best as a mother to bring up my children the right way. However, I'm not, what's right for me may not be what's right for another person. Anyway, that's a totally different discussion for another day. Let's stick to boundaries for now. So, nowhere are we commanded to have control over other people. And guess what? That's what we always spend at least 90% of our time doing. We try to have control over other people's lives. We want to control their lives. We want to, and if it doesn't go our way, we end up gossiping about them. We end up, we want to have control over their career choices. We want to have control over how they decorate their homes. We want to have control over literally every aspect of their lives, forgetting that when we put in the good and leave the bad out, we set boundaries within ourselves. Okay, that brings me to the next point, which is keep the good in and leave the bad out. Boundaries help us to distinguish our property. Our property, I mean your personal space, what you are entirely responsible for. I'm talking about your life. I'm talking about your home. I'm talking about your children. I'm talking about your relationship. I'm talking about your job. Okay, well, your job is a bit tricky, especially if you're employed. However, I think you get what I mean, right? Like what you can and can't do, or what you're allowed or not allowed to do at work. For example, if you're self-employed, it's a totally different discussion, because it means that you have control over, to a certain extent, over pretty much everything that happens in your business, right? So these boundaries help us guard our heart with all diligence, according to Proverbs 4:23. We need to keep things that will nurture us inside our fences, and keep things that will harm us outside. That's what I mean by good in and bad out. Learn to keep the good in. So many of us, the reason why I'm actually doing this video without makeup, I think, is probably to make this point as strong as I can, because oftentimes we put so layers and layers and layers of coverings over the outside, what people see, but what they don't see is what's in here. In here could be so ugly and so malicious and so vindictive and so all kinds of negative, right? Yet on the outside, we are every woman's dream, and every woman wants to look like us, and every man wants to be with us. Okay, I don't know why I said that. Moving on. In other words, boundaries help us keep the good in and the bad out. They guard our treasures, according to Matthew 6:19-20, so that people will not steal them. They keep the pearls inside and the pigs outside. Those are not my words. That's Matthew 7:6. Okay, but does it make sense what I'm trying to say up to this point, right? Like when you keep the good, when you learn to keep the good in and the bad out, you've not only placed boundaries within your person, but you've also placed boundaries and sort of taught the people around you how to treat you. Sometimes we have bad on the inside and good on the outside of us, as I've already said. In these instances, honey, we need to be able to open up our boundaries to let the good in and the bad out. In other words, our fences need gates in them. Gates, gates, gates. This is a very, very, very tricky one. I will give you an example. The other day, well, I think a couple weeks ago, my neighbor wanted to park in my parking space, right? And I had just like come home and like I wanted to go out, and so I didn't really need to come all the way in, so I just like parked outside the gate because there was, the parking space, there was nobody there. So then she comes and starts yelling. She's like, "Oh, you took my parking space," yada 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 yada. So I was like, "Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't think that it was such a big deal, but because I was just going out." So a few days later, she needed to. My car was in off service, and she needed to service hers at home, and she needed parking because she usually parks outside the gate and I park inside the gate. So she she literally brought the mechanic, and the guy was had his tools all over my porch, and I was like, no, I'm sorry. And this has got nothing to do with the fact that, you caused such a huge scene about me parking in your space, which I totally understand. And I'm sorry for that. I remember saying sorry. But you cannot do that. This is my space. This is my space. Okay. This is where I begin and end. This is where I begin and where you end. So you cannot just use my parking space or my porch, the front of my yard, without asking me. And for a second there, I felt like I was being petty, but really it wasn't a matter of me being petty or anything. I needed to draw the line of where I begin and where I end, because I realized that there were certain things that had been happening up to that point that needed to, that I needed to say something. Okay. Anyway, moving on. So that's what I say. That's what I mean when I say, when the good is on the outside, we need to open our gates and let it in. So it means that if whatever it is that you're projecting to the world, however the world sees you, I have been in a relationship with someone who, whenever people met him, he was the perfect guy, but that was not really true. All right. So at the end of the day, I guess what I'm saying is, if people can see a certain part of you, if you're you're faking it, and you actually do want to be a good person, not for anybody else but for yourself, to nurture your soul, you need to open the gates. You need to open up your mind, your heart, your soul, to allow whatever it is that people are seeing that is good about you, even though you know that within you you're not a good person. Open up the gate, let the good in, keep the bad out. Hey Destiny, hi darling, thanks for joining me. Okay, so next, my next point is boundaries in words. In the physical world, a fence or some kind of structure usually delineates a boundary. In the spiritual world, fences are invisible. Nevertheless, you can create good protective fences with your words. The most basic boundary setting word is no. N-O. Like I said before, it took me years to be able to say no to anybody about anything at all. And that made me go through so much pain in my life, in my relationships, at work, with family, and it ended up really destroying me on so many levels. Hi, Destiny. Yes, only positive vibes, baby. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mwah. I love you for that. So, as I was saying, I didn't know how to say no at all. But then I realized after reading a book, I'll put a link on the book later. I learned to say no, and for me it started small. I started by letting people take their shoes when they get into my house, because that means I'm letting them know this is where I begin, this is where you end. You cannot get into my house wearing your shoes, because I don't want all that dirt. I don't know where you've been. I don't know where where those shoes have stepped on. I don't care how clean they are, but you're not getting into my house with your shoes on. I'm sorry. So that said, it lets others know that you exist apart from them and that you are in control of you. Being clear about your no and your yes is a theme that runs throughout the Bible, especially in Matthew 5:37 and James 5:12. No is a confrontational word. The Bible says that we are to confront people with love, saying, no, that behavior is not okay. I will not participate in that. The word no is also important in setting limits on abuse. Any kind, whether, be it people taking advantage of you, be it, people not treating you properly, or taking you for granted, or just being all over your space without your yes. Does it make sense? I hope it does. So that brings me to my next point from boundaries in words, and the big word here for boundaries is no. From no, you do not compromise. No compromise. Yes, Destiny. It's okay to say no. Your home is your palace and sacred place where you dwell. Yes, honey. That's how I look at it, because I seriously don't get it whenever people, because most of the people I've crossed paths with often think of me as stuck up or too uptight or snobbish or whatever. But I'm like, look, I have such big respect for people's boundaries, for people's property. And I'm not talking about physical, tangible property. I'm talking about where you begin and where I end. Does it make sense? So I expect the same courtesy, especially with people that are closest to me. So if you do not have that, or if you cannot respect my space as I do yours, then we've got a problem. And in that way, over time, I've lost many people I once considered friends. And it's not because I want to let those people go. It's just, you have served your purpose in my journey, or rather in my story. And since we no longer see eye to eye, I seriously don't think it makes me the bad guy to end this journey here or to let you go. That's just it. it doesn't make me a bad person, or does it? I stand corrected, but I think that my home is my sacred sanctuary, and I just, how I want things to be done, or how I would like things to be done, is how they need to be done. So whomever, I don't really, you know, have a lot of visitors at home. Not so much because of that, but I mean, at home, I would rather meet with people outside. Of course, I do invite people at home. I do invite, you know, I do have visitors, but I don't have many visitors. I mean, like, I don't like host parties or whatever, you know, things like that. But my point is, when people come to my house, they know. The people who know me know, when you come to my house, you take your shoes off at the door before you enter my house, because I don't want whatever it is that you're coming out, you know, from whatever you're coming from, into my house. As Joyce Meyer puts it in her book, Your Battle Belongs to the Lord, she tells a very, you know, interesting story that really resonated with me, and that I'm actually thinking of reading to the kids tonight. She says, I once heard a funny story about a father whose children were trying to convince him to let them go to a movie that had a little foul language and a few inappropriate sex scenes. They argued that just a little bit wouldn't hurt them. He told them no, and then proceeded to give them an example of how dangerous just a little bit can be. He baked his children's favorite cookies and then told them he had added just a tiny bit of a new ingredient. Guess what? He added dog poop. Yeah. But he guaranteed them that they would not taste it at all. Not one of them was willing to try the new cookies. And just like that, Dad had made his point. So you see, when you don't compromise, and when you don't when you don't compromise, and you don't, your yes is your yes and your no is your no, and you don't compromise by, you know, doing just a little bit, you know, no, he's a good friend, let me just, you know, it's okay, you know, he's an important person, and you know, I mean, I'm honored to have you in my house. Of course I'm honored to have you in my house, but this is my house. This is where you end, this is where I begin, so take your shoes off. This is my house. Oh, Lordy Lord. Jesus said that we are in the world, but we're not to be like it. That's in John 17:14-16. In Romans 12:2. Likewise, Paul wrote to Timothy that a soldier in service did not get entangled in the enterprises of civilian life. His aim is to satisfy the one who enlisted him. That's in 2 Timothy 2:4. My brother is in the army. And I remember when he started, that was like 12 years ago. He wouldn't talk, he would tell us about the crazy stories, you know, like about the training sessions, about they were able to learn how to sleep standing. I mean, like, who does that? Anyway, the way, you know, they would scram for food, and like everything was hurried, and hi Ebony, hi darling. And so it was like it was one of those where um he would talk about literally everything else except what we actually wanted to hear, which was, how is it really, you know, like in the army, like what do they allow you to do, what do they not allow you to do, like what's the training about, like you know, like how do you use it. I mean, like he would tell us the most shallow things, but he would not. Hi Pharaoh, what's up? Thank you for joining me. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Mwah. So he would tell us like anything but what we wanted to hear. I think this is what Paul meant when he wrote to Timothy, to say that a soldier in service does not get entangled in the enterprises of civilian life. Did I explain that correctly? I think I did. I think I did because I mean it's the closest analogy I could think of, of my brother in the army, and how we've always related to him. I mean, like even now, I've seen less of him within the past 12 years. Even though we grew up really, really, really close, he's like my twin brother because he came less than a year after I was born. So we've always called each other twin. So he would tell us, even to date, he will talk about literally everything else about his job, but not like about a mission that he might have gone out on, like foreign missions and, like things like that. He does not talk about those. He will tell us, oh, I went to Egypt, or I went to, Somalia, or I went to whatever, I mean, wherever I did, but he won't really like tell us what we actually want to hear. He can be part of like a rescue mission or one of those big missions, big military missions, but he won't really like tell us what we're craving as a family, as his siblings, for example, to hear like, how did you go, like, like what happened, and like all that kind of stuff. I think I'm actually saying too much right now, which I don't think he would appreciate. Sorry, bro. What does this mean for us? What does it mean for us to be able not to compromise? It means setting standards. It means living by those standards. It means not compromising when others urge you to. Peer pressure. I remember growing up, I wasn't really the kind of kid that would have that would fall for peer pressure really. I didn't really have a lot of friends growing up because I had all these, insecurities, and you know how kids can be so mean. Woo! My lordy lord, kids can be so mean because I have always had, like a problem with my teeth. And yes, I know you can fix them, but I think over time I have always felt that, I've been fixing them not just for me, but because of how I want people to see me. I know I'm going off topic right now, but yeah, I'm trying to make a point. Stick with me, I promise. I will bless you. So, oftentimes I will eventually do it. I know I'm gonna do it. It's in the plan. I've been saving up for it, to have like a whole dental work. But I guess, like, growing up, kids would make fun of me. They would make fun of my smile. So I never really smiled a lot. So it means that I think, in a way, God was protecting me from some of the things that, would have ended up in peer pressure. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that's how I've always looked at it. Like certain things that I wasn't able to do growing up, like as a teenager or as a kid, that I saw, other kids do, which did not really end very well for them. I think it was God's way of protecting me. Like he allowed this to happen for me so that I was, hi, darling. Oh my. Ooh, I love that name. Yeah. So, like, I couldn't even laugh. Like, I can laugh now because, I mean, I give little ish about what the next person thinks. Well, until someone actually literally stares at me like this. And I'll be like, oh my God, they're looking at my teeth. But yeah, over time, I've just really learned not to care what people think, and be okay. Stop looking for my identity in or validation in in other people, in my relationships, in in my romantic relationships, or seeking validation externally instead of finding my identity in God. That has helped me so much because I know what God says about me. You might, look at me and think, oh my gosh, it does not look good because of her teeth. But I'm like, wait a minute, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says I'm beautifully and wonderfully made. in God's image. I am God's masterpiece. I am worth more than rubies and diamonds and all the other promises, beautiful things God says about me personally. Well, of course, about you too. Anyway, what my next point is, don't believe the just ones or a little won't hurt. Remember the story we talked about the one in Joyce Meyer's story about the kids who wanted to, if you're just joining me right now, I read a story about the kids who wanted to, I got this from Joyce Meyer's new book, The Battle Belongs to the Lord. Your Battle Belongs to the Lord. If you're joining me now, like the few people who joined just now, I'll read it again, okay? I once heard a funny story, that's Joyce Meyer, not me, about a father whose children were trying to convince him to let them go to a movie that had a little foul language and a few inappropriate sex scenes. They argued that just a little bit wouldn't hurt them. He told them no, and then proceeded to give them an example of how dangerous just a little bit can be. He baked his children's favorite cookies and then told them he had added just a tiny bit of a new ingredient. And the new ingredient was dog poop. But he guaranteed them that they would not taste it at all. Not one of them was willing to try the new cookies. And just like that, Dad had made his point. So, just a little more. Letting one person come into your house or coming to your space or coming to your life and, mess up your boundaries. Just a little bit. Just one person can end up into two people. Just a little bit or just once ends up in teen pregnancies. I am a teen mom. Was a teen mom. Gave birth to my daughter when I was 19. And it was a classic case of just a little bit, just once. Just once. I was a mom 9 months later. Anyway, my point is... just a little bit can end up in addictions. That's how, you watch one porno and, you kind of like it. And the next thing you're thinking, ooh, wait a minute. You're feeling bored and it's cold and you don't have your significant other and you're thinking, just a little bit. Just one more. Won't hurt, right? Before you know it, you're hooked. Just a little bit of drugs. Just a little bit. Just one sniff of cigarette or cocaine or heroin or meth or whatever else is out there that people are taking right now. That's how addiction starts. Just a little bit of, I just want to go to the club. I just want to hook up, it won't hurt. I mean, it was just one guy. It's not a big deal. Before you know it, you want to keep going to the club just a little bit, just to have someone else look at you. Hi, Melina. Did I say that right? Melina Alima. Hi, darling. How are you? Just a little bit, because we crave that validation. I remember being in that moment, in that season of my life. I loved going to the club because of my insecurities. The moment someone just told me that I looked nice or that I'm beautiful, and of course in the back of my mind I know that person just wants to, just wants some, but I'm like, oh my God, you think I'm beautiful? Ooh. You know what I mean? And before you know it, you're hooked. And you keep chasing after the next validation. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. Old, young, white, black, blue, yellow, whatever it comes from. You just want someone else to say that you look beautiful and that you're stunning and that you speak so well and that you're so elegant. They forget that you're actually educated and you're smart and you're compassionate and you're actually really a good person, but they don't see that because of what you are projecting, because of what you're giving them, because what you are showing them on the outside. You have no boundaries. There's nowhere that, shows them where you begin and where they end, or where you end and they begin. So over time, and don't get me wrong, having boundaries is totally different from creating walls around you, because you see, creating walls around you means that you have all these high walls, higher than the wall of China, which I did at some point in my time, in my life. But over time I realized that putting those walls do not allow you to have meaningful relationships. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about relationships with family. I'm talking about, for so long, my family didn't know anything that was happening in my life, which can be a good thing and which can also not be a good thing, because should something bad happen to you, in 2016 I fell ill, and because of my illness, well, which I still have, it's a chronic disease. That's when I was diagnosed, and I got so depressed, and I was just like, because there was, everything was going for me, like my career was just up there. By November 2016, I had made almost like $500,000, and I was just like, I was at the top of my world, like everything was going for me. I was just, I was content with being a single mom, and I was just really, really okay with where my life was, not just financially, but, spiritually. And then one day I go for, like, I kept asking myself, what would have happened had I not gone to the hospital that day for my regular annual checkup, because I almost didn't go. I almost called the doctor and said, I can't make it this year. I think I'm going to come back next year. And maybe then it would have been too late. Do you get what I mean? Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, at that point in time, my family didn't know much about me. I would talk to them, but I would give them whatever it is I wanted them to know. And so it reached a point where depression, I wanted to die. I would beg the doctors to just let me die, because I couldn't take it anymore. Until one day my little girl came to me at the hospital, and she was like, "Mommy, are you gonna die? Mommy, I don't want you to die." And I was like, I called the doctor and I was like, whatever we have to do, I am going to be okay. With or without this illness, I am going to be okay. And I choose to live. And so many times I almost burnt myself down. Like, I had suicidal thoughts. And it was because of lack of boundaries. I let people treat me whichever way they wanted. And instead of saying no, or instead of letting them know how their behavior was affecting me, I wanted to kill myself. Can you believe that? I feel so stupid right now, but saying it out loud right now, but that's where I was in my life. And so, a friend of mine, actually my business partner, he's an old German dude, and he once asked me, what, when he heard the story about me wanting to burn myself with my kids in the house, he asked me what kept the paraffin in the bottle. Like, I went out, bought paraffin and bought a lighter, and like, I was so ready to do it. Like, I wanted to kill myself because it was just too much. I was just going through way more than I could handle, and I could cry myself, and I looked so old. Like, I looked 10 years older than I actually was. And this was after a very successful point in my career, and then all of a sudden life was just happening, and I didn't have any control over it. At least that's what I thought. All because I did not have boundaries. I didn't know where I began and where anybody else that I interacted with ended or began. And so I let them, come in and out however they wanted. My point is, when we set standards, right? When we do not compromise, and when we set standards for where we begin and where others end, it sets a very level ground for them and for us. It lets them know, I don't hate you. I love you, but I love me too, because the Bible tells me to love you the way I love myself. Now, it's funny how most Christians like to twist this, or the world likes to twist this verse, because that will make you think that you need to love other people more than you love yourself. But that's not what the word says. The Bible says to love other people the way you love yourself. Now, how am I going to love you if I don't love myself? It means I have to put myself first. I was actually telling my kids this afternoon. Please don't laugh. I was telling my kids today that I'm gonna marry myself. Are you shocked? Yeah. What I mean by that is, I'm going to look for a minister and witnesses, and I'm gonna buy a pretty white dress, and I'm gonna do it in a church and make vows to myself as I would to a man, and say those in front of witnesses, to commit to treat myself as I would like a man to treat me, to be good to myself, to take care of myself as I would like someone else to do for me, to buy myself pretty flowers every other week, to take myself on date nights, I seriously, strongly, this is something I've really, really, really thought about for so long. And I think that way I'm able to set boundaries. I'm able to, it's not a wall, it's a fence. You can't see me, but you know where you begin and where you end. It means when you come and you start treating me the way I have not been treating myself, then I know it's wrong. If I've been kind to myself and taking care of myself spiritually, mentally, physically, and then all of a sudden you start criticizing my exercise regime, or oh, you exercise too much, or you work too much, or I don't like the way you parent, or why'd you buy yourself flowers, or you spend too much on taking yourself to all these dates, or saying demeaning things to me, I will know that that's not how I would like to speak to myself. And so I know that's not how I would like anybody to speak to me. Make sense? Yes, so I'm gonna do it. 2020, here we come. Anyway, I may be preaching to myself right now, but I seriously and sincerely hope that I'm not just preaching to myself. I am speaking to someone else's heart and soul right now. And, because look, your words also define your property for others as you communicate your feelings, intentions, or dislikes. It is difficult for people to know where you stand when you do not know, when you do not use words to define your property. Your property means your soul. In this instance, it means your soul. It means your where you begin and where you end. Okay? It means where you're at. Make sense? Yeah. So God does this when he says, I like this and I like that. That's why God gave us commandments. That's why we have the do's and don'ts in our lives here on earth. And your words let people know where you stand, and it gives them a sense of edge that helps identify you. Am I making sense? I don't like it when you yell at me. Would be a really good, statement to tell someone who's not treating you properly. Because it gives people a clear message about how you conduct your relationships, and it sort of lets them know the rules of your yard. Am I making sense? Like, if you let people know, if you tell someone, I don't like it when you come into my house and you don't remove your shoes. And you don't have to be confrontational about that. You don't have to be, oh, catty and, no. You look the person in the eye, and with all the love you can master in your heart, and you tell them, I don't like it. This is my house. You have to take your shoes, because I like my house clean. My children live here. I live here. This is my sacred sanctuary. I don't like it. I don't like the way you speak to me. It makes me feel disrespected. And it's not how I would speak to you. I don't like it when you take my stuff and you without asking me. I don't like it that there are a lot of I don't like it statements that you could actually say. It's easy to think, oh, a little won't hurt, or just this one time. As I said, however, when we compromise, it only holds us back from God's best. Honey, learn to live boldly and enthusiastically without compromise. We can do this. You are possible. I am possible. Let's be possible together and master the courage to ask people to take off their shoes when they're in our house. That's the end of our video. If you like this tank top, is this a tank top or a vest? Well, whatever it is. Yeah. So these are on sale on Phenomenal Magazine. You can go to phenomenalmagazine.wordpress.com. I'm going to, if you joined me late, I am going to post this on IGTV and on YouTube, Vicky Mag. And I would like for you to go to phenomenalmagazine.wordpress.com. There are lots of inspirational t-shirts. As I said in my posts yesterday, there's nothing cooler than having an affirmation across your chest. It's sort of, hi, finance chick, what's up? Having an affirmation written boldly on your chest, even on your low days, like you have something like this, I am possible. I started printing these t-shirts because at a very low moment of my life, because I needed to remind myself that no matter what, I am going to make it. End of story. No excuses. I am not going to use my children not to succeed. I am not going to use my background or my upbringing or my past relationships or my pain or my hurt or whatever mistakes I've done in my life in the past. I am possible, and so are you. If you believe that and you want an affirmation on your chest, and many, many, many other affirmations that I have, well, the ones on the website are prototypes, but they will be printed soon. But you can place your orders via phenomenalmag1@gmail.com. All the details are on phenomenalmagazine.wordpress.com. Please, 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 I could use all the business. I know, I just asked you guys to literally just buy my t-shirts, but I would love it. I would love it if you would buy my t-shirts. And I would like to, this is something that's very, very, very dear to my heart, and I would like this business to, I would like to make it into something bigger, like have this, I'm already talking to a designer friend of mine that I've worked with in the past. We worked together a few years ago when I was still in the corporate world. And yeah, she's excited to do this project with me, and I want to see how far it goes. And I hope you will be there to um, walk this journey with me. And so please, if you would like these t-shirts, there's this, and there's the, if you go to my timeline, you will see the black one, the one with the long sleeve, with golden, with a gold print. I am possible. Please, 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 I would love for you to purchase one. And yeah, that's perhaps it for today. Until next week Sunday, please join me again next week Sunday. We'll be talking about something totally cool, and I hope it'll bless your heart, especially as we are gearing up for the Christmas holiday. We'll be talking about finding Mary, and I don't mean Mary the person, I mean Meriy, which means when you're not, when you see everybody else, losing their heads over the holiday season, and you're wondering what's the big fuss about, I am going to help you find Mary. So if you want to find Mary with me, please join me next week Sunday, and we will do this together. Also, go to Phenomenal Life with Vicky Meg here on Instagram. It's my podcast, and join, subscribe, go to YouTube, Phenomenal Life with Vicky Meg, and I'll see you there. Bye-bye. God bless you. Have a blessed Sunday. Enjoy your weekend. Preparing for the new week. God bless you. May everything you do this week touch someone's life one way or another. And may God's love, light, comfort, peace that surpasses all understanding be your portion. In Jesus' name, amen.